I was pretty done. I still want to see a lot of stuff. In the corner of my eye, I see a grizzly bear, maybe like 15 feet away from me.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Fin Motorcycle Adventures Podcast. This is your hub for everything off-road, dual sport, and adventure motorcycle. And now, here's your host, John.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 37 of the Fin Motorcycle Adventures Podcast is finally here. Don't forget, if you love or you enjoyed this podcast, remember to rate, review, subscribe, leave us some feedback, and help us improve this show. And as always, if you have somebody that you want us to try to reach out to and interview, make sure you send us an email, bendmotorcycleadventures@gmail.com. And as always, support our website, bendmotorcycleadventures.com. Okay, let's get right into the thick of episode 37. Our guest, Yun, rode the Pan American Highway, the longest road in the world last year. He actually just wrapped it up. So we're getting a really fresh perspective from his point of view. He rode with some of the Los Panamericanos for a little bit on the trail, and rode with another gentleman who will eventually interview Wyndham. So again, fresh perspective on the Pan American Highway. We love that. And more insight on Alaska. And of course, I had to ask him about the mosquitoes. But really the first question that came to mind was, how long were you out there and how many miles did you ride?
31,890 miles. So roughly 32,000 miles.
Holy smokes, that's a long ways. And about how long did that take you?
That took me about 9 months and about and a half. I was actually originally intending to come back in May, but I ended up having to come back early because my dad was sick.
Okay, sorry to hear that. I've got a question here from someone on Instagram that you may know, at Wyndham_T. Wants to know who your favorite riding partner with another DR650 might be.
So Wyndham is kind of an interesting story because I met Wyndham online a whole year and a half before I left. And at that time, I had two DR650s. One was black, and then I bought one for the trip that I re-outfitted, which was the white one that I rode. And Wyndham was like, oh, I'm going to be discharged from the Marine Corps. I'm going to be coming down, going down that way, not going to Alaska, but just going straight down the Washaya trip from North Carolina. He needs a bike. So then he contacts me and say, hey, do you want to sell your other bike? Because I told people on the forum I was going to sell everything that I have other than the bike I'm taking. So he ended up buying my other DR650, and we linked up in Mexico, and we rode through the rest of Central America together, and we rode and we met up with Ian in El Salvador, and then all three of us rode through the rest of Central America relatively together. There was a few days where we split up and did our own thing, and then but we ultimately went through all the way from El Salvador all the way to when we got off the ship from Stallred in Colombia, and then we split ways. But yeah, I mean, Wyndham would be my favorite other DR650 riding partner.
Right at the top of the list. Speaking of Ian, he chimed in with a question too and said, hey, DR or KLR, which would you choose?
That's a really interesting question because I thought about that quite a bit myself. I'd probably still take the DR right now, but if I were to say I start from scratch, a KLR would not be out of the question. I think the two bikes are relatively similar. I mean, the DR is a little better off-road, it's a little more simplified. But once you have the bikes fully loaded with all your gear for, a whole year travel, it's the weight is negligible. And the type of road that we took, I mean, me and Ian went up a some single track road in Nicaragua going up a volcano. Wow, I dumped my bike so many times. It was so ridiculous. It was definitely not. It was definitely not built for that. And with all my gear, all my luggage going up that road, I mean, it's not even considered a road. I mean, it started off with just deep sand, and then when we got up further, it was just turned into a single track, rocky going up the hill. And by the time we were maybe like another like 3 or 4 miles left to go, it was like completely pitch dark, and we were riding in like absolute darkness in a single track going up to see the volcano. I mean, the volcano was absolutely stunning, and Ian will tell you that it was one of the best part of the trip. But man, that was definitely like I would definitely if even if I did ride a Dior up there, I would have to have it with no gear on. I mean, it was really rough going up there, and I mean it's not. I don't think it's something that I would I would take either the KLR or DR on, or plan to take those bikes on. I mean, in general, you ride some rough roads, some sand, but once it's fully loaded, it's a bit of a bear for me, at least for my skill level wise. It's quite challenging.
What do you have to do mentally to prepare for a ride of this size? Where do you have to get somewhere special in your head, or what kind of planning did you have to do?
So I started riding about 6 years ago. I had a mentor that started with me, and he coached me in the beginning to do like 100 miles and 200 miles and then 300 miles. I did about 3,000 miles under him. And after that, we rode a few like 1,000 mile trips from DC area to Deals Gap, and we did that for a couple years in a row. And then I did a few other trips up to New York area, and then I did one cross country trip from Washington D.C. area all the way to Seattle, and cut through Kansas, Colorado, and up. That was about 8,000 to 9,000. So by the time I'm leaving for this trip, I had an expectation of how much riding I'm going to be doing and the type of travel I'm going to be doing. So the mental preparation is really the amount of after a while on the road, like it gets exhausting. And I was talking to Ian about this. We left about the same time, and we met up in Argentina when his bike finally died. And I by that time I was maybe 1,000 miles away from Musaya. I was I was pretty done. I mean, I still want to see a lot of stuff, but I was like, man, I'm kind of exhausted. I kind of want to go home. And at that time, it's been about like 9 months for both of us. And we were having that conversation in that town that we happened to met each other. We were like, yeah, and that I think that's the real mental prep. It's I don't know if we call it homesickness, but it's just it gets exhausting on the road, and you're always looking for a place to stay at night. I mean, if you don't have a budget and you have all the money in the world, I guess it's never really an issue. You find the most expensive hotel or whatever, it's easy to find. But we're always on a budget, so we're always looking for the best deal or don't want to get scammed. So it's kind of a challenge. You're trying to find places where they'll let you push your bike in. I never left my bike outside, unless it's wild camping. But if I go to a hostel or any kind of place where it's more people around, it's always inside. So then you have to find a hostel or somewhere that's affordable that'll let you put your motorcycle inside so that it's safe. So I mean, it does get exhausting from the border crossings, getting food and changing money. It started to wear a lot on me after 8.5 months or so. I just started feeling like, ugh, I kind of feel done.
So, for our listeners out there, it's not just this beautiful bed of roses, which would make me wonder if you could do it again. Would you do it again, Yun?
I don't know if I would want to ride through Central America again. The biggest problem with riding through Central America with the border crossing. I mean, I would definitely visit Mexico again and ride down Baja. I absolutely love riding in Baja. And I could totally visit Mexico and spend a couple months there, or just the summer months there, or even go into Guatemala. But I don't want to cut through all those countries because it's very exhausting. And every time you pull up to the border, they're trying to scam money out of you. You got 1,000 helpers standing around. You can't leave your bike alone, but then you have to go in to do the paperwork, and they got all these people standing around your bike, and you have everything strapped on top of it. It's just it's a recipe for things to get missing, and it's a very stressful environment, cutting through all those borders. Um, and it's just and every single one of those countries have some ridiculous fee. Now, South America is a whole different story. South America, all the border crossings, more or less, they're free. You just do the paperwork, and there's nobody to help you. There's no people like haggling to like, hey, can you give me some money? I'll help you do the paperwork. And there's no making copies of your passport and all that stuff. They just do it right there. Whereas like in Central America, you got to run across the street and make a few copies of this and that, and then like you give them, it's just a whole charade. Um, so if I were to do it again, honestly, I would ride in Central, go down to Mexico. I mean, it's just a short trip, but if I were to do another long trip, I'd probably looking to do the trip from London to Beijing. But I really want to be able to ride through Tibet, and China's kind of on and off about that rule. At any given time, the rules changes. Sometimes you can ride there, sometimes you can't ride there. Uh, you can ride, but you always have to have a tour guide, and then sometimes you can ride by yourself. So the rules are constantly changing, and I hope in a few years, if that rule is more lax, and I can be able to, you know, navigate through Tibet or China or ride through Tibet myself, I that would definitely be on the top of my list for sure.
That's interesting. Actually, I brought this up on the show before, but on Amazon Prime, I actually watched this documentary. I think it was a 6-part series where this guy who holds some Guinness World Records for riding around the world led a group from London to Beijing. And I think he does it every year. Looked amazing, but there was definitely some sketchy parts to that too.
I mean, I definitely, I don't know. At one point, it's the same thing going down to from the States all the way through Central and South America. There's a lot of very sketchy places that I've ridden through, and there's certain places in that I was very grateful that I was with Wyndham and I was with Ian through that leg of the trip. Um, I would still do it alone. There's quite a few days that I did a lot of the riding alone. But having a buddy or two being there, it just takes away a lot of the stress. It really takes away a lot of stress. It's not that it's not doable. It's just it takes away a lot of the stress, and you can enjoy yourself a little bit. And then there's always someone else watching your back instead of you. Um, you know, always got to be on full alert, looking out for things. So, um,
All right, good perspective. Now you talked about missing home, which I assume is a given considering the length of this ride. But did you actually ride from home to get this thing underway?
yeah, yeah. The first from June to July, I essentially for all of the Canada track, it was solo for me. Um, all the way up to Prudhoe Bay and then back was pretty much solo. And when I was coming down from Alaska, then I met up with another rider. Well, and we rode more or less 10 days together down the Cassiar Highway, and then I was solo again for the next month until I was in Mexico. And then in Mexico, I spent about like a week solo before I met up with the Colorado boys.
Now I've got to ask you a couple questions about Alaska. If you've listened to the show, you know that I need to know how the mosquitoes were. Did they treat you well, or were they just huge and insane?
The mosquitoes, it's so wild. Absolutely so wild. I thought I knew what a lot of mosquito was. I went to China one year and I got stung in like 40 times over at night and I got really sick and I was like, wow, this is a lot of mosquitoes. Until I went to Alaska. Once you pass the Arctic line, now I was pulling up to one of these road works. It was the last like 150 mile to Prudhoe Bay, and I just see the worker there, and I see this black haze cloud surrounding him, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" So I came to a stop, and then man, that was a mistake. Like there was a swarm that just shot straight into my helmet, and I had to like take my helmet off. I was swatting everywhere, and I it was surreal. Like it was a black cloud, and there was gotta be billions and billions of mosquitoes flying around. And I was and these are not tiny. They're not like the tiny mosquitoes that you get like a bunch of bites on. These are humongous mosquitoes, like, and they are everywhere. Wow, it was an interesting sight, and then the buzzing sound is absolutely horrifying. Like just the sound they make because there were so many, and you just hear "Oh," like
All right, so we have ourselves another confirmation. Huge mosquitoes, mass quantities. You've definitely got to time it right if you're traveling through Alaska, or just keep moving. Don't stop, right?
yes, surreal quantities. I've never thought that's possible.
Dalton Highway. I'm very interested in riding that road. What was that like?
Oh my goodness! So I dumped my bike on the Dalton on the way back. It's all gravel, and it's I think 400 some miles up top, going towards it. I was going through it at like 40, 45 miles per hour the entire way, and it's it's okay if the gravels are packed down, but then they keep throwing new gravels and then throw the calcium on top. And when you ride, like I did about like what 14 hours up to Prudhoe Bay. I stopped quite a few times, take photos on the way up. And when you got there, there's like nothing there. I mean, there's nothing there for the entire road. You just see the pipeline on the side, but it's just gravel road all the way through. And you get there, then there's nothing there, and it's freezing. Once you pass Atacama Pass, which is the 100-mile marker from Prudhoe Bay, you go up this mountain pass, and then the second you hit that mountain pass, it turns into sub-freezing temperature. And then when you come down that mountain pass, you feel the wind keep blowing towards the Arctic Ocean, and it's just all the cold wind. And we were there; it was snowing the day before. It wasn't actually snowing the second I was there, but it was slushy on the mountains. And everybody that came out of the mountain did a little squirrely when you turn up into the mountain. I know another friend of mine that went similar time dumped his bike, but it's freezing cold after you pass there, and then you ride in the freezing cold all the way down to Prudhoe Bay, and you get there, nothing like Ushuaia, nothing. There's nothing there. There's like one or two stores that's not it's not even well marked, and then you get gas, and then you turn around, or you pay the $200 to stay at a little shack that they have. That's what is like their only hotel that they have. So what I decided to do is I ended up driving back. I was like, I have nothing to do here. I'm not gonna crash here for a day, and then but I rode all the way back. Everything was fine. And then I got to Cold Foot, and then I got up the next day. I only slept like 3 hours. I couldn't sleep because the sun was always out, the 24-hour sunlight. It's very easy to ride all day up there. And then I started riding, and then coming around one corner, fresh gravel, slid out. Bike did a car wheel, bent the frame,
Ooh.
like completely twisted the rear frame. and damaged a ton of things. Pannier ripped wide open. I had a yard sale with all my stuff around the road. Went back into town, found the only guy that does like machine work, and he welded it back together, hammered it back together for me, and then I rode another 20 some thousand miles like that.
I suppose that's one of the upsides to having metal panniers. If something like that happens, at least you can get it fixed and keep moving, right?
A bad fall, that's absolutely true. But for minor falls, it is absolutely the most annoying thing. Like every time like I dropped the bike, the thing would slide out, the mountain pins would like bend and I had to bend it back and then and every time you like dump it, like it likes to crack on some of the edges. I mean, they're decent panniers. They're not the super super thin metal tusk panniers. But the Happy Trail panniers I have, I mean, they're about, I would say about twice as thick as the tusk pannier. But still, even then, they still like to crack on the edges once you dump it with enough force. There's pros and cons to it. And honestly, if I were to go down do the same trip to do South America again, uh, I don't know. I would still be torn because having the hard pannier is pretty nice. And it's a visual deterrent. People just less likely for people to mess with the stuff. I mean, it's definitely not going to protect from any real theft, but it's definitely a good visual deterrent.
Okay, back to Prudhoe Bay. Now that's essentially as far as you can travel north on the North American landmass. Any sense of accomplishment when you got up there?
I mean, like it feels the same way when I went down to the bottom of Argentina. I don't know if I feel a sense of accomplishment. I mean, even now looking back at it, I don't particularly see that as I think it's just a destination point, and it's all the little things that I saw along the way that makes it rewarding. Prudhoe Bay specifically was very lackluster. I love Atacama Pass, absolutely beautiful. You find that everybody that's been up to Prudhoe Bay before, they ride up to Atacama Pass and then they turn around, because there's literally nothing after that. Just 100 miles of nothingness until you hit Prudhoe Bay, and then there's nothing there either, other than the oil pipeline, and then and like two possibility to gas up your bike, or one, I don't remember, but that's it. And then you turn around and you come back. There's literally nothing there. It's just a destination spot. Um, but Atacama Pass was very memorable. It was a fantastic mountain pass. Very very impressive. Um, Overlook the valley and stuff.
Okay, so remote nature aside, towering landscapes aside, is Alaska a lot different than the rest of the lower 48?
Absolutely. I would say at least I didn't actually go to I went to Fairbanks and I went to Valdez or Valdez. I don't know how you pronounce that. Uh, I didn't go to Anchorage. I didn't go to Anchorage. Anchorage is like a normal city with normal accommodations, is what I'm told. Fairbanks is super tiny. I thought Fairbanks was a large town. I pulled in Fairbanks. I was like, finally civilization, because I was coming from Canada. There was like, I didn't shower for like 10 days because I was just wild camping and there was like nothing there, right? So like, I get to Fairbanks, people are living in dry cabins everywhere.
Really?
Like there's no running water. So that they go into town, like literally Fairbanks has like a 2 or 3 square block where the university is. There's running water there and there's grid, but everywhere else there's no the pipes are not, because of the permafrost. They have to do special things to bury the pipes to have running water, and the rest of the infrastructure is just not there. So it's only like the 2 3 city block square where the university is actually have running water. Everybody else live in dry cabins and comes up and get water from like a water uh, facility, and then they take it back, and then they have outhouses where you sit there and there's no screen doors while you do your business, and all the mosquitoes eat you alive and then you're just swatting them while you're doing your business. So I stayed with this guy for like 3 or 4 days because after I dumped my bike, I went up, stayed over there again. I stayed there for 2 nights, and then I came back and stayed there for another like 2 or 3 nights before I left Alaska. But yeah, very, very different. And the people that live there, like, well, they're only there in the summer. They don't really live there in the winter. So most of the population moves out and only come back, and they do other works during the colder season and in a warmer climate, and they come back in the summer to live out there. Very, very rural.
Okay. Did you happen to have any encounters with wildlife in Alaska that you otherwise wouldn't have had probably down here in the lower 48?
Yeah, for sure. One time I was up in Canada, and I was on the border of British Columbia and coming up to around the Whitehorse area near the Northwest Territory. And I was riding, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't know it was that late. And I looked at my watch. I was like, "Whoa, it's that late," because it was still the same like sun's out and like the temperature didn't change. So I was like, "Oh, wow, it's 11. Let me stop." And it started to drizzle. So I was like, "Let me stop and camp." So I ended up camping somewhere close, and then it started raining, and then I just pulled off on the side of the road, find a little spot, and then camped. The next morning, I packed everything. The fog was so dense because it rained the day before, and then it was starting to warm up. Like you can't see anything. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. I got everything packed, drove out the little path that I came in from, and in the corner of my eye, I see a grizzly bear, maybe like 15 feet away from me, eating something, like mauling something. And I was like, "Oh my God, oh my God. Should I go take a picture?" I was like, "Ah, no, forget it. Let me just keep riding." I can't even see where I'm going. I don't know if there's like the mama bear like next to it or anything, but like, holy crap. Let me just keep riding. But there was buffaloes everywhere over the road. Like buffaloes are like, they're like the deers. Like they're everywhere there. And there was quite a few mooses that we saw, but I didn't see anything like super close. I saw a few much further away, some of the mooses that were much further away, but nothing close enough where it's that I can really feel their size.
Okay, no thanks on that grizzly encounter. I probably wouldn't mind seeing one from afar, but you're pretty lucky to get out of there when you did.
I know, and it was really close to my camp because I was maybe only 500 feet away from the road. It was in a forested area, so you can't see it from the road. But it was maybe like 200 feet away from me. Like it was like I was literally coming out, and I see it on the side. I was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, I brought this up before on the podcast, but this past summer I was out riding and I stopped and I got off my bike and I looked over and there was a cougar staring at me. It was like 15, 20 feet away. So I got back on my bike and he kind of moved away, but not with a lot of urgency. And I often wonder if some of these animals are adjusting to motorcycles and if they're all that intimidated by us anymore.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see tons of bicyclists on the road, and the bicyclist tells me that is one of the most horrifying things because one, they're not particularly super afraid of motorcycles. More often than not, they hear the sound, they walk away. But bicycles, no noise whatsoever, and they're always telling me they're coming down the hill. If they see a bear there, it's very dicey every time because they don't move out of the way. There's no noise, so.
For this reason, I'm a little leery about riding through national parks like Glacier and Yellowstone. I've seen a lot of videos of buffalo in the middle of the road, and if you were sitting there on your motorcycle, gridlocked in traffic, you'd be pretty darn vulnerable. And I don't know if I'd want to put myself in that situation. I definitely want to ride through those parks, but maybe the best medicine is to get up and ride early and get the heck out of there before you get into a situation like that.
Yeah, I think the closest time that it was really, really sketchy was I was in Peru. And I was up in the mountain pass, and it was literally this one lane road, but there's traffic going both ways. So it basically is one lane with a little bit of shoulder, and every time a car comes, there's super traffic jam because they try to negotiate around each other. And then I come up to a section where there's at least like 15, 20 herders are herding like these like bulls in the road. And I was like, I have nowhere to pass, either the cliff or forward. But then the locals are like, yeah, don't worry about it. And then they were managed to get around it, but they literally took up the entire road, and I was just sitting there like facing them as they're walking towards me with all these like bulls with like gigantic horns, and they were just herding them all like in the middle of the road, and there was like nowhere to go. I was like, wow, I definitely panicked.
Did you happen to ride through Banff on your way up to Alaska or on your way back down?
When I went through all those places, it kind of sucked. The forest fire was burning while I was near there, and it was so hazy you couldn't see anything, like terribly hazy. I think there was one instance where it rained for a little bit, and I was at the Columbian Glacier, and it cleared up for like maybe like 2 hours after the rain. I was like, oh, fantastic! I took a few photos, and after that, it was like the cloud came, the haze came in again, and you can't see anything. I didn't spend too much time there because I couldn't see anything, and it was. I really want to go back and experience that much better, but I mean, it's all very interesting with the timings. You don't see the same things, especially with these natural stuff, depending on what timing you're there.
Interesting. Banff is a place that I would love to go and ride through and visit myself. Switching gears a little bit, I'd be interested to know, after you're out on the road for a couple of weeks, I've never done a ride of this magnitude, obviously, so maybe a couple of months, do you stop pulling over? Do you stop taking in landscapes? Do you stop taking photos and checking out historical markers and stuff like that? Does it more so become about just knocking out miles and getting to your destination?
I took a ton of photos. Sending my drone up, taking photos, taking videos is like before I started riding with my girlfriend in Colombia. That was like kind of my interaction because you're solo, you're riding in the middle of nowhere. The interaction to create footages, create videos and photos with your drone, with your camera equipment, and set up the tripod. Like every time I see like a fantastic shot, I set up the tripod right away and then click. It doesn't really get old. It doesn't get boring. It's because I like to keep data, and I like to keep data on a lot of things, including with all the miles. I log every single mile, every single expense, and every single mile per gallon for every single tank. I mean, like I love doing that stuff. So I have data on everything. I've not gone through every single thing yet. I only gone through the cost of gas in every country I've been through, the average cost of gas, and Canada was by far the most expensive. Yeah, absolutely, and like, by far. Not like well, then again, I kind of went all the way up to the rural area, so the price is a little inflated because if you're close to the States, it's a little cheaper. But when up there near like Alaska area and like it's about like average $5.50 to $6 a gallon. Like incredible, but by the border, it's pretty close to the U.S. Maybe like $4. It's not like ridiculous, but as you go up, there's very little options for gas, and then they do get slightly more expensive. But I like to keep data, and that kind of kept me going. And before I got my phone stolen in Cali, in Colombia, the city of Cali in Colombia, I documented every single night and where I stayed. And every person that hosted me, I documented it. But then after I got my phone stolen, it became a little challenging, and I missed a few days. And once you start missing a few days, you kind of toss your hand up. You're like, this is not complete anymore.
Yeah, I've been on your website. Tremendous amount of detail there. Quick question: if you were going to do this again, What piece of gear or equipment did you have with you this time that you just couldn't do without? You couldn't ride without this piece of equipment on the next ride.
Riding gear alone, I love my Kriega backpack. I have an R20. Absolutely love that thing with a 3 liter bag in the back. I've always have it filled with water. I walk around with it everywhere. And after 10 months of abuse, it still functions and nothing's broken, nothing's worn out. Like, it is a fantastic backpack. So as far as as far as like riding gear concerned, absolutely loved it. Hands down, my favorite gear. Because even if I'm not wearing my motorcycle gear, I'm walking around town, that's still my favorite piece of gear. Just to have everything there, have water all the time. It's my favorite thing. The tent peg hammer is by far the most useful thing ever. Yeah, so everybody's like, "Oh, you need a hatchet." I was like, "When are you going to use a hatchet?" You could use a hatchet if you go for that kind of ride, but like for the kind of ride for these kind of long duration rides, and the hammer comes into handy for everything. It was straightening out my panniers when it bent, straightening out pieces of the metal for the pannier mount and it bent, undoing the rear axle when it's too tight and I can't pull it with a small lever. So it's very simple just to take a few whacks. Installing the wheel bearings, the hub bearings, like the hammer is, and of course, hammering down the tent peg, which is what it's actually used for. It's absolutely the most magical piece of gear, and it's so simple. And I have the MSR hammer, the tent peg hammer, and it's got a really heavy swing head, but a really light aluminum body. So it's actually itself is very light, but it'll undo the rear axle bolt every single time, even if it gets torqued to like 80 foot-pounds and I can't pull on it with like a breaker bar or anything. I just whack it a few times and it comes loose. And then when I put it back on, I just whack it a few times the other way to make sure it's tight. So like for trail use, I would not go anywhere without my hammer now. Like it's my favorite piece of gear.
All right, listeners, make sure we add that to our motorcycle adventure packing list, the MSR tent peg hammer, tons of uses, according to Yun. And Yun, I was curious to know if before you set off on this trip, did you have any reservations about going or specific countries or border crossings, or was there anything like that that may have alarmed you?
Yes and no, but so this is a bit. I I was born in Taiwan. I actually lived in Brazil for 2 years when I was younger in São Paulo. And I moved to the States after that. So I don't know, adjusted with a lot of these things in different countries. The haggling stuff. I grew up with that in Taiwan. So it's not a lot of this stuff. It's a culture shock for me. And then when I went to Brazil, I experienced all the poverty type stuff, the crazy inflation. I was there in the 80s, and the crazy inflation with the currency, constant inflation with you get like a giant bag of money, you get paid, you can only buy a loaf of bread with this giant bag of money, and the next day all the money is flying in the street because it's not worth anything. And it happened so often when I was younger and when I was in Brazil. Like there was a lot of these things, and then it's just nothing is really a culture shock. And of course the food that I eat, and I've experienced a lot of things beforehand. So like eating all these different types of food and stuff, it didn't really, like, nothing really fazed me. I know a lot of friends that I travel with, or that I met on the road, or we travel together. A lot of this was like relatively new experience for them, and for me, the experience is really just the culture experiences of the different places. But a lot of the I guess the unsafe feeling kind of stuff, it I don't know if it like really it bothered me at first, but I was really quick to adapt to it because I really like go back to my experience before, and I was able to settle in really quickly. Like the first week in Mexico, I was like, oh, this is kind of sketchy, and then afterwards, I'm just like, normal again. Like everything's fine, but Tijuana is very special too. I stayed there for 4 days, and that was a rough area, but I went out all through town and went through all the bars and hung out there. It was pretty fun, but I would definitely not stay there for too long. It's definitely a very very touch and go place, border town. Yeah, lots of stuff happening. Yeah.
All right, we're moving towards wrapping this up here, but I want to know what's it like when you reach Ushuaia? You've reached your ultimate or your final destination. Again, did that evoke any feeling from you, or a sense of accomplishment?
So you get down to Ushuaia and then you look back and you're like, wow, I still have nearly 2,000 plus miles to go to get back to Buenos Aires to ship my bike. And you really want to just sell your bike at Ushuaia and call it done because it's just like, what the hell? I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too many miles. And you still ride back up. And that ride, I would say, like, it depends. It depends on the ride. And particularly for that ride, it is really, really miserable going down to Ushuaia and then coming back up. It is freezing cold. 2 of the days that we're going down to Ushuaia and coming back, they closed the road because the regular 30 miles is a regular crosswind that you drive on a regular basis and nobody bats an eye. But when the wind picks up to 50 miles per hour and they have people getting blown off the road on motorcycles, then they're like, yeah, we got to close the road. So it's not a fun drive. It's not a fun ride. And there are some very fantastic experiences because of that. On the way back, we were all done and we were riding on the way back, and it started raining, and we were just freezing to death, and there was nothing in sight except for this sheep farm, like hundreds of miles of nothing, and it's just like the sheep farm in the middle of nowhere. And we were on the Chilean side when we crossed over, and we pulled in, asked to take shelter there, and the guys were like, oh yeah, come on in and stay in one. And it was me and my girlfriend, so we stayed while they were doing whatever sheep farming they were doing, and then afterwards they took us into the house, dried all our stuff, served us a huge pot of a beef stew and all. It's super tasty, and we got all warmed up, and then they sent us on our way, and the sun came out, and we were like, wow, this is fantastic. It was such a great experience, but it's the same thing I would say when I go out to Alaska. That last 100 miles, I just wouldn't do. But Ushuaia is a little different because Ushuaia is a huge town. I think it's got a population of like 50,000 people there. And it's got every store you can imagine. It's different than Prudhoe Bay. There's like nothing there. And Ushuaia is like an actual huge town. And ironically, it's kind of defeating because when we got there, they were telling us that there's a town in Chile south of Ushuaia that is going to be the new Fin Del Mundo, end of the world, because it's south of Ushuaia, and they have hit the magic number of 5,000 population. So that is officially now the new Fin Del Mundo, and Ushuaia is no longer it.
So did you officially make the Fin Del Mundo?
Yeah, so I'm all good. It was like it was literally like 5 days after they changed it to the other place, but no, I don't know. The adventure goes on, and I want to come home, and then once the bike got fixed, now I want to leave again. I'm like itching to go for another adventure. I mean, it's part of the reason why I'm going to Colombia again. So, dying to leave again. I thought I was never going to ride again. 32,000 miles with that DR saddle. I was like, oh man, my butt is really hurting. I don't really want to ride this. And then the second I came back home, ordered all my parts, bike got fixed, relaxed for like a month, and I'm like, all right, when's the next trip?
Okay, before we close this out, do you have any advice for people who might want to ride the Pan American Highway, the longest road in the world?
Anybody that wants to ride this route, I say I meet a lot of people on the road that are not very well prepared. They don't know their bike, and they don't know how to. they don't know how to work on their bike. They don't have the right tools. They don't have the right gear. It really limits where you can go. So if you want to do the trip, the prep is important because it frees up your opportunity.
What about gear sponsors or anything like that? Did anybody help you out along the way?
Several of the companies that I work with really went supported their own product. Giant Loop gave me a new tank bag after I came back, and all zipper was broken after 10 months of using it. They just gave me another bag. I sent it back to them. They gave me another one. Forma boots. My boots was leaking. I wore it for a year. Send it back to them. They sent me a new boot. Like, it's really doesn't get better than that. I mean, they stand behind the products.
All right, Yun. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Awesome story. I know you're going down to visit your girlfriend, so have a great time down there. And we're looking forward to see where you travel to next. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And Yun, again, safe travels at Break the Cycles on Instagram and breakthecycles.com if you want to check out what he's got going on, listeners. If you would like to follow along with us, at Bend Motorcycle Adventures on both Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget about our website, bendmotorcycleadventures.com. Now, I want to let you know that probably by mid-September, I will have a new website where I'm going to move this podcast to and rebrand it. It'll be a more content-oriented website other than a tours and an adventures type website. So a lot of stuff going on between now and July, but I hope to have that thing launched and unveiled by the middle of September. So stay tuned for that. But for now, you can find our podcast on bendmotorcycleadventures.com or just search for us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, Spotify, you name it. We're out there. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Next week, really looking forward to it. Another new episode, this time with Gianna Velarde, who actually raced the car this year. She raced a car for KTM, did the interview. Really amazing, inspiring story. So I hope you will tune in next Monday for episode 38 with Gianna Velarde. And until then, I think I'm going to get out of here. Listeners, again, I want to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Take care.